This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. Who gets the kids? That's always the question. We're told that 50% of all married couples in North America will, in time, divorce. I don't know how true that statistic is, but it sounds about right. And often, most often, divorces are contentious, and far too often the children are the footballs, and they suffer immensely from that. Having been through a divorce, I can tell you that it is a kind of death. It's the death of a family, and one does grieve even at the same time as perhaps being relieved. Well, what about equal parenting after divorce? That is not the current rule in Canada or in this province, but there are lots of people who would like to see that changed. Rob Crite is one of those people who sings the praises of equal parenting after divorce, and Georgialee Lang is a local lawyer who writes about these issues and has handled pretty much any divorce you name. She says, "Oh, I handled their divorce." Rob, give us your nightmarish experience and why you want to see this law changed.
For me, it's been 6 years since separating. My son was a year and a half at the time. My goal at the time was to try to make things as smooth as possible. I accepted this part-time parenting role, never liked it, tremendous grief around it. About a year of that sort of thing, we wound up in court. I was trying to mediate the whole issue. I wanted to stay out of the courtroom environment. I wound up with a consent order, last-minute consent order with a lawyer, and it was for every second weekend with an overnight Thursday access in between.
Yeah, it's like a parole.
About a month later, my son, who was then almost 3, maybe 3.5, he started having problems and complaining bitterly. He wanted to spend more time with me. And I realized that I had done something wrong here.
And so your belief is that what should happen is that people should, as close as possible, share parenting 50-50.
When I started reading the background material, the research papers, the social scientists,
yes,
for the last 20 years, that's been the conclusion, that kids do better. Kids with a single parent have a lower outcome, poorer education outcome, worse relationships as adults, higher incarceration rates. Kids need their fathers.
The idea that most of the time the mother will get the child, just because this happens so often, is really based on a kind of old mythology, or a mythology that's being turned on its head by modern life, which is mother's the nurturer and the homemaker and so on, and dad goes out and gets the bacon. But that we haven't lived that way for quite a while.
No, and every father now is in the delivery room when that child is born.
Yes, of course.
I was the first one to bathe my son. I was the first one to diaper him. And I have 2 children now. I'm an expert at this sort of thing. I'm a part-time parent today.
I find it almost sad that you have to say that.
Yeah.
That you have to boast that you were the first to diaper your son, because clearly if you're having to say that, someone has said, well, you don't qualify.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you make of all this?
Well, I have seen so many fathers
Yes.
be marginalized and treated like second-class citizens. And it's all because of this, like you call it a mythology.
Yes.
It's all because in the 1950s, with very little research, there was just a trend towards giving children to mothers. and particularly children under 7. It was called the tender years doctrine.
Yes.
And everybody bought into that. And of course now we're 50, 60 years later, and a lot of judges are still sort of promulgating that position about moms and dads. And unfortunately, the legal system is based on precedent. So they look to see what other judges did before. And they're ignoring a whole burgeoning area of research that shows that fathers need to be involved in their kids' lives.
I remember so vividly the first visit to my lawyer when we got our divorce, I don't know, 30-some years ago. And he said, okay, here's the thing. And he read this statement. And the statement said, we agree that the mother has made a better, not relationship, what's the word I want? In any event, the mother has a better relationship with the daughter-child.
Bonding?
Bonding, thank you. Than you do. And I said, that's drivel. Where did that come from? He says, don't worry about it. That's just what we have to say.
Yeah.
I said, but it's not the truth. He said, the law has nothing to do with the truth.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Well,
is that the case?
I mean, that you know, when a client walked into your office, a male client 20 years ago,
yes.
you told him, look it'll be sole custody to mom.
Yes.
Probably that'll be the end of that story, and you know, you'll get every second weekend from Friday after school or Friday night
yes.
to Sunday. And that was it.
So the rule of thumb has been all along and continues to be BIOC, best interest of child.
That's right.
Okay, but many people feel that when folks like you, and we're going to talk about the parliamentary issue in a moment, and when people stand up in Parliament and try to say equal parenting law, they say, well, that violates best interest of child.
That's right.
But the truth is that that is in the best interest of the child. The science is in.
Have two parents.
Two parents, and kids want that.
Yes.
When young adults of divorce
yes.
Are interviewed, 90% of them say, I wish I had access to both of my parents. And those are the ones that have grown up in the 80s and 90s
yes.
and haven't seen their father. And even I had my, and like we were talking, these orders given
yes.
by the court are open for review. Ours came open for review. We had a 7-day trial. I did everything I needed to do to prove that I'm a good parent,
yes.
based on the best interest of the child model.
Yes. Yeah.
The judge, in his summary, said, you're a good father.
Yeah.
And then essentially gave custody of my son to his mother.
Yeah, you particularly noted that you questioned that this was the appropriate judge in your case because he really didn't have a lot of experience with families and family dynamics and sociology and psychology. He was mostly a criminal guy. Based
on shortages, apparently, in the Ministry of Justice, he was brought over from criminal court to hear a family court hearing.
Your very painful situation, Rob, because I get this sense that this is like dreadfully painful for you, this whole story, is ongoing. This has not been cleanly resolved yet to your satisfaction?
I just received the most recent order, as Georgialee said, about the best interest of the child, the tender years doctrine. My current order that I received last Friday is based on the tender years doctrine.
What is that? I don't know that.
That was refuted 15, 16 years ago.
Oh, even longer.
And it's every second weekend.
What is the tender years doctrine?
Tender years doctrine was a doctrine in the 1950s that said automatically if kids are 7 and under, we don't even look at the father.
Really?
Absolutely. And that was the law in British Columbia for a very long time. That dissipated, I'd say 15 years ago or so, maybe even 20 years. But there's still some judges that think that 4 nights a month with a father is sufficient. That's what Rob's doing.
And my son thrives with me and begs for more time,
Georgialee, one of the problems that we have here is that if we're living in BC, for example, we're not dealing with a single piece of legislation. We're dealing with Federal Divorce Act and Provincial Family Law Act.
That's correct.
Do they have some kind of consistency with one another?
They actually do, although the language is different between the two pieces of legislation. The judges sort of merge them together, and so really, at the end of the day, they've got this one philosophy about who should parent, and it really doesn't matter whether you're coming to court under the Divorce Act, which means that you're a married person, or under the Family Law Act, which means that you could be a common law spouse or a same-sex spouse.
Now, there's an interesting organization, and I was really kind of cheered to read about them, Leading Women for Shared Parenting. I forgot to give our gang, lw4sp.org. Very, very interesting group, and this is a group of very high-powered women who've got a lot of accomplishment on their resumes and so on, and they are in support of this idea of equal parenting.
Yeah, their whole message is a rebuttable, a presumption of shared parenting.
Yes.
That's what they stand for, and they're made up of over 100 women right across the world.
Yes.
And they're politicians, representatives, senators, lawyers, psychologists, journalists, women that have influence, who have banded together and are trying to reestablish fathers in children's lives based on cutting-edge research.
And they say, Rob Crite, they say very clearly that they feel that they're supporting men, that men have been getting the dreadfully short end of the stick for a long time.
Yeah, still, and men today. Families are 50-50 income earners. Mom and dad are both out working and sharing the parenting chores. Men have almost become equal in parenting time. It's something like 5.5 hours a day for mom, 5 hours a day for dad.
Yes.
That's just the way it is. But after divorce, dad's kicked to the curb.
I confess that I had a sort of personal knee-jerk reaction over the last few days. There's been an ad running in the local paper for an event called Transitioning Through Divorce. And there are these photographs of these three interesting-looking women who are going to be the guest speakers and facilitators. And my first reaction was, why are there no men on this panel? And then I looked, and it's 4 women. And I thought, boy, I hope there's some men groups, some male groups who are having similar sessions, because do males ever need this?
Yes, they do. The male groups, they get the name, fathers' rights groups, and that is considered very pejorative. I mean, you're a fathers' rights group.
Why is that pejorative?
Oh, because you're a wacko. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Fathers' rights groups are so pushed down, and you're unreasonable. They're because some of them fight hard, and some of the other organizations resent that, and they dismiss them as just another wacky fathers' rights group.
So let me see if I understand this. It's all right to parade for rights if you're obese, or if you're gay, or if you're Catholic, or Jewish, or Muslim, or left-handed, or whatever. Yeah. That's okay, yeah. but fathers shouldn't have rights?
That's right.
Right. And then they're dismissed as that's not in the best interest of the child, necessarily.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, let's look at this piece of legislation that at least was heard. Mm-hmm. It didn't make it. It was shot down, somewhat in flames, but there were some very interesting public opinions about it, and I know you two are very much up on it. Okay. Yes. So we'll take a little break, folks. The subject, of course, is equal parenting after divorce, and we'll be back with our guests in a second. This is just your opportunity to send us a note to davidberner.com, and a chance for those lovely folks who support us to say hello here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Back with you in just a second. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home. Building recovery that works. Leading Women for Shared Parenting put on their website this statement, which I think must be heard here. Shared parenting is an issue which knows no bounds. Children benefit most from the active involvement of both parents, regardless of their marital status. The undersigned recognize that absent issues of abuse, neglect, or abandonment, government policy and laws must be structured in such a way as to maximize the opportunity of all parents to contribute to the social, emotional, intellectual, physical, moral, and spiritual development of their children. And yet, Georgialee Lang and Rob Creit, the Canadian Bar Association has opposed equal parenting law. Why? I mean, they're not here to defend themselves.
Well, there's a number of theories. Let me give you some of them.
Yes.
One is that they will lose too much business and they make too much money with this best interest of the child test. I'm not saying that that's what I think, but
Okay.
that's a common theory. I don't understand it because, of course, I'm a strong proponent of shared parenting.
Yes.
And I don't understand, I mean, unless I get all the perfect male parents in my office, which I know I don't,
Yes.
I don't run in often to a father that shouldn't have very extensive co-parenting. And, should it be 50-50 exactly? Perhaps not. Because one has to look at a practical schedule. If mom's home 5 days a week because she's a stay-at-home mom, then the week on, week off probably doesn't make a lot of sense because you got a dad working. But then there's another way. You have to develop a plan that encompasses both parents. The CBA has been against it for years. North Dakota is having a vote, a referendum right now.
Yes.
And once again, the North Dakota Bar Association is lobbying strongly against shared parenting.
Oh, I thought you were going to say North Dakota wants to secede from Ireland. Yeah. Let's talk about this. Before we go to this legislation that didn't quite make it, I totally lost what I wanted to say, so let's go to the legislation.
Well, there were, in fact, 80 MPs who voted for this piece of legislation.
Rob, they were all backbenchers.
Yes.
So the Conservative government that has shared parenting as part of their policy and on their platform
Didn't support it.
They backed out.
Yeah.
So every cabinet minister was told the party line. I was shocked.
And no NDP and no Liberals voted in favor.
No Greens,
Yeah.
no Liberals. And like I said, the Conservative Party let down the shared parenting lobby in Canada as well, much to my utter dismay and surprise, because it's in their portfolio.
Now, Barbara Kay, who's an old friend of ours for
Yes.
a number of other reasons, is a columnist for the National Post, and a darn good one.
She's also a leading women for shared parenting.
Right, and she wrote very strongly in favor of shared parenting, but a colleague of hers took umbrage and wrote a very, very strong piece. She says equal shared parenting does not put kids first, and she talks about these kinds of details that can throw monkey wrenches into this kind of plan of shared parenting. But she's not just complaining. She offers possible solutions. She says maybe there were some triggers in the legislation that didn't help.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, like?
Well, for example, I believe that a couple of lawyers in Toronto
Yes.
drafted this bill for
Yes.
for Maurice Bellicott.
Yes.
And I think had they not been so strident about 50-50, I think we would have gotten a lot farther with this bill. Some of the states in the United States are saying shared parenting. Let's just start with a minimum of 35% for fathers. But they didn't want to do it gradually like some other states and provinces have. They just came right in full bore, and that's one of the reasons why the bill didn't pass.
Rob, what would you say to the accusation, and I think it's a scurrilous one, but we have to raise it, the accusation that the only reason you want shared parenting is to avoid alimony payments?
It's absurd.
Yeah.
I want to be a father. My son wants his dad.
You just want to save money.
My son is the one who started this. Even at the age of 3, he was begging for my time, and still is. He's now 7, and still. And the funny thing is, in a little boy's way, he'll tell me all kinds of stories. Mom said it's okay to stay longer.
Oh, good,
Would you please write Mom a letter?
Oh, good.
He'll make up all kinds of stories, but he's trying to get that time. And how can you say no to a child like that? But it's so hard to constantly.
So what do you say besides personally? You say, look, don't be silly. My motivation is being a good father, and taking on my responsibilities as a father. But what do you say strategically to the people who raise this specter of it's all about money?
Well, let me tell you what I do in practice. When I have a client come into my office who's a high income earner and he tells me he wants shared parenting, let's say he makes in excess of $300,000 a year.
Sure.
High income. I say to him, no problem. I'm going to advance that. I'm going to try to get you shared parenting or joint custody, but you have to pay full child support. Are you prepared to do that? Absolutely they are. Absolutely. Because I want to show the other lawyer and your ex-wife that this is not about the money. And they pay because they want their kids.
I've heard that story again and again from other fathers too. It's not about the money.
They don't care. They'll pay the money, even though it's unfair.
So Valancourt, what's his name?
Maurice Valancourt,
He was a Conservative member of Parliament, is a Conservative member, right? I mean, he's the guy who put this forward.
That's right.
It fell on its face. Is there any movement afoot to get it back up in the next round? Well, I mean, we don't know who the government's going to be.
There's actually a bill in the Canadian Senate right now, Bill S-216. Senator Ann Cools has sponsored that. It's at first reading, and it is a bit of a softer tone on shared parenting. And where it goes from here, I don't know. Now, I've talked to some other Liberal MPs. Ann Cools was a Liberal MP, but Mr. Trudeau released them all, and they're now independents.
I remember,
And so another local former Liberal MP, former mayor, he doesn't even know anything about the topic. He's never heard of it.
Of course not.
And so I've written all kinds of letters to these guys, just trying to introduce it. And same at
As
the
I
provincial.
happen to know who you're talking about.
Yes, don't we all?
He doesn't know anything about anything.
No.
That's what it seems like.
He's having a nice free lunch, is what he okay. Before I get sued. Look, here's what this writer. Here's one of the suggestions the writer makes, and how would this sit with you? Instead of saying, as Bill C-560 does, that every child has the right to know and be cared for by both parents, she says, why not add the words to the best of their ability? Now, would that just open a big can of worms and find you constantly in litigation?
That's where we are right now.
Yes.
My final order is open for review December of 2015. After a 7-day trial, I've calculated I've been in front of judges for over 70 hours.
Yes.
And I can't imagine what that costs the province. But I know that equal shared parenting would reduce this litigation, and that's what it is. It's protracted litigation. I didn't know what that meant until I got in the middle of it.
Yes.
December 2015, I'll be reapplying to the courts. I may have another 7-day, maybe a 10-day trial, just to try to get equal parenting with my son.
And I think you made a very good argument on your blog. You say really that this is a slap in the face of progress. You didn't use those words; those are my words. But you say they also tried to resist the notion that parents across Canada may invoke the new law to reopen their custody orders and agreements, potentially leading to a landslide of fresh litigation. Well, we would never do anything. We would never change any laws if we were always worried about everything in history being reversed.
Exactly.
You know.
Yeah. So fairness now, fairness before.
Yeah.
Retroactively.
Yeah. What do we really want to do? So tell me about the movement, if there is such, other than this group of women, leading women. Is there, for instance, locally? You live here in Vancouver.
I live in Vancouver.
Yeah. So. Are there a group of guys who meet for coffee and pound the table
lament their situation?
Yeah, I hope you don't.
Because
meet with
we
the
have
Legion.
time on our hands.
Yeah, that's right.
There are very few men's organizations. Vancouver doesn't really have a formal organization. There is in Nanaimo, there is in Cowichan. They're a little more progressive on the island, maybe.
Okay.
And what we do need to do as men is get together and lobby for reform. I'm doing what I can. I've written all my MPs. I've written many MLAs. I've opened a few doors in government to try to get things changed.
What's the general response? I mean, often when we write to members of Parliament and members of the legislature, we don't hear. I think the turnout is worse than direct mail. you don't hear from minimum 80% of the ones you write to.
Some of them have given me a bit of a hearing. I've had some conversations on the phone with Libby Davies, for example, and she had voted against the bill. And then provincially, I've talked with Adrian Dix about it.
Why would Libby vote against the bill?
I don't know.
Is she just following a Mulcair directive?
She was told to.
Must be.
She was told to.
Yeah.
Why would the NDP vote against it? I don't get that.
I don't know.
You would think it would make total sense.
Yeah. You know, David, as far as groups, a couple of male lawyers in Toronto started an organization called Lawyers for Shared Parenting.
Ah, very good.
Nobody would join.
Oh my goodness.
I believe I'm the only female that is a member. They've had this organization for about a year, and I think there's probably 8 of us.
I must tell you, as a sense of disclosure, and that we can see it always on the screen. One of my favorite and best sponsors of this program is the Trial Lawyers Association of BC.
Yes.
So I didn't call them and ask their thoughts, but I should call them and ask.
Yes, it would be very interesting. I don't think they've made any public statement, like the CBA has.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see whether they have I know they have a family law committee.
We've got about a minute left. Rob Kreit, quickly, what's your current status with regards to your son? Do you see him as often?
I see him this afternoon. I have him. This is my weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm very excited about it. And I clear the deck.
Yeah.
No, I don't like making other appointments on that weekend.
Good.
And like I say, he thrives with us. He has his own room in our home, and he's a part of the family. He's not a visitor.
Yes.
This is
your family.
And I say in December 2015, my final order is open for review, and I will be going back to court. And in the meantime, I continue to ask his mother if she can mediate the issue and try to get it sorted out outside of the courtroom.
And what's your closer on this subject? It's got to happen.
I admire people like Rob, and we connected a year or so ago.
Yes.
It's sad. It's very sad. I know so many good fathers that are begging to see their children, and they're just marginalized, and I'm not sure why. I don't get it, but that's the way it is right now, and I think it's going to change. There's certainly a movement in the United States that is much more popular and has been much more successful there.
I hope it changes for all our sakes, for yours, but for all our sakes. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks, David.
All right, folks, that's it for today. And next week we continue our theme about children. How is it possible that in the richest jurisdiction on earth, British Columbia, we continue to have so many children? Not enough food, not a good home, not enough clothing, can't buy the sports equipment to play, can't buy the violin or whatever, can't rent the violin to study music, are getting less than their educational share. That'll be the subject next week. Thanks so much for being with us here on Shaw Community Television. Good evening.